Hi, fourth graders. This is Miss Day for day 4 of our read aloud about the Revolutionary War. Chapter 4, Onward to Victory. Great Britain viewed New England as the center of Americans' power. British leaders began planning ways to cut it off from the rest of the colonies. When winter passed, British General John Burgoyne began moving south from Canada toward New York, where he joined forces with General Howe. The American forces were unable to hold their ground at the Battle of the Brandywine in Pennsylvania. Brandywine and Saratoga. In July 1777, General Howe left Burgoyne and his men to hold New York. Howe began moving south toward Pennsylvania, where he planned to take Philadelphia. Remember, that's important because Philadelphia was where all of the Continental Congresses were happening. On September 11th, he defeated Washington at Brandywine Creek, just 25 miles, 40 kilometers outside of Philadelphia. That's where my hometown is. But Howe's decision to take Philadelphia was a costly mistake. About the same time that General Howe had set off for Philadelphia, Burgoyne went on the offense. He captured American forts Ticonderoga and Edward in July, then moved on to make camp in the town of Saratoga. Burgoyne planned to move his troops south and take the city of Albany, but General Horatio Gates was camped nearby with a growing American force. The two sides clashed on September 19th. Gates' forces were able to hold back the British. Burgoyne was forced to withdraw. In early October, Burgoyne took 1,500 soldiers and attempted to circle around the side of the American army. The British were quickly defeated, and Gates began using his massive army to surround the main British camp. Burgoyne was forced to surrender several days later. Burgoyne's surrender was a major victory for the Americans. This is telling me that the American colonist soldiers are doing well right now in the Revolutionary War. New friends. As winter approached, Washington settled his troops at Valley Forge near Philadelphia. The weather was harsh and food was scarce, but good news was soon on its way. During a diplomatic visit to France, Benjamin Franklin and Silas Deane heard about an experienced German soldier named Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben. They hired him to go to America to train Washington's forces at Valley Forge. Steuben taught them how to use their weapons properly and march in formation. He even wrote a manual that the American military would use as a guide for many years. General Gates' victory over General Burgoyne encouraged France to join the cause for American independence. France had already been secretly providing money and supplies to the American forces. So right now, we've just learned that France is on America's side. That means that America is getting a lot of help from them, which is helping them do well in these battles. In 1778, the country officially declared war and began sending ships and troops to America. Other countries soon followed France's lead. Spain entered the war in 1779, and the Netherlands joined in 1780. Go ahead and read a first-hand look at Steuben's regulations. Remember, this is somebody who's helping the American army. Pause and read it on your own. Baron von Steuben improved the American forces with his training exercises. The Americans' new allies, that means people who are on their side, had the resources to compete with Great Britain's huge fleet of ships. Combined with the American naval forces, they were able to keep the British busy at sea. They attacked ships off the British coast and kept them from sailing to America. Pause right now and answer, how are other countries helping America during the Revolutionary War? How are these other countries helping America during the Revolutionary War? The Battle of Guilford Courthouse. By early 1781, the American forces had proper training, manpower, and powerful allies. On March 15th, General Nathanael Greene brought 4,500 American troops together at Guilford Courthouse in Greensboro, North Carolina. Carolina. General Cornwallis and fewer than 2,800 British troops attacked. The Americans caused major damage to Cornwallis's forces while losing few men themselves. Rather than take any unnecessary losses, Greene withdrew. Take a second to read about Nathanael Greene. The Siege of Yorktown. On August 1st, Cornwallis and his men arrived in Yorktown, Virginia. Cornwallis hoped to rest his men and get additional supplies before continuing. Almost immediately, spies working under French General Lafayette saw that Cornwallis was settling in for a long stay. Lafayette told Washington about Cornwallis. Washington learned about the same time that a fleet of French ships and 3,000 soldiers would soon be arriving in the Chesapeake Bay. On August 19th, the combined forces of Washington and French General Rochambeau began marching toward Virginia. 10 days later, the French fleet arrived at the Chesapeake Bay. Meanwhile, Cornwallis waited for British General Henry Clinton to arrive with more troops and supplies. The American and French forces arrived at Williamsburg, Virginia on September 20th. 8 days later, they marched on Yorktown and began planning ways to get past Cornwallis's defenses. Over the next several weeks, the Allied forces beat down Cornwallis. They cut off his supply routes as he continued to wait for Clinton's arrival. By October 16th, Cornwallis knew that Clinton would not arrive in time to fend off the Allied attackers. He attempted to escape with his surviving forces, but was foiled by a heavy rainstorm. He officially surrendered on October 19th. When you surrender, that means that you give up. Though some fighting continued, the war was essentially over. News of Cornwallis's defeat reached England a little more than a month after the surrender. Upon hearing the news, the British Prime Minister, that's the person who's in charge of the government, described the situation simply and correctly. Oh God, it is all over. Take this second to read about Charles Cornwallis, who was part of the British military. Tomorrow, we're going to read our last chapter, Chapter 5, Aftermath. Remember, what I want you thinking about right now are how the Allied forces with the American colonist army, how the Allies helped them in the Revolutionary War.